Hello, welcome to day 2. My name is Richard Fisher, broadcasting live from the show floor at Xponential 24. Delighted to be here. And today with us we have Mike Horton, who's the Chief Executive Officer of GEODNET. And for those of you who don't know, GEODNET is, they say they are building the world's largest GNSS reference network. I know that because I just read this ad in Inside Unmanned Systems currently. But the reason we mentioned that is, Mike, GEODNET is unfamiliar to the UAS community, so welcome. We're really happy that you're here.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So if you could express to us what the fundamental value proposition is that GEODNET brings to bear to this drone community.
Yeah, so GEODNET is a huge RTK network with over 5,400 stations registered onto the GEODNET network, providing RTK coverage pretty much throughout North America and Europe, as well as in a number of developing economies such as India, and we're working on growing it in Brazil and Southeast Asia and so forth. So the fundamental, most basic value is it's really easy to get RTK with your drone, connect to GEODNET, and you'll have an RTK fix within a few seconds, and you can count on deploying that pretty much anywhere.
Right. So that sounds like a pretty standard kind of reference network until you consider the kind of underlying business model, right? Which I think is really kind of disruptive. And I think from where I sit, that's what's enabled such a rapid and accelerated rate of growth, because you have kind of a participatory blockchain configuration. Can you tell us about that, Mike?
Yeah, sure. So first, to highlight the growth, we're adding
please.
about 150 stations to the GEODNET network a week. So
a week, okay.
Yeah. So why does it grow so fast, and how have we gone from 0 to over 5,000 in under 2 years? I think that the core point of that is the participatory model and the blockchain nature of the project. So you can add a GEODNET station, you have to acquire it, but you can add it to the network in a permissionless fashion. And once that station is added to the network and is producing high quality geodetic grade data, you start to earn GOD tokens, which is a blockchain token that's actively traded on a number of crypto marketplaces. And so that provides earning power for the person who selects to host a station, and that can be deployed really most anywhere throughout the world. There are a few places you can't do it, but most anywhere throughout the world you can acquire, set up, and run a GEODNET station and contribute RTK data back to the network, and at the same time earn GOD tokens.
So all those station operators are actually earning tokens.
Yes, and that includes folks in the GNSS community. We have lots of operators that are, in the blockchain side, purely in the blockchain side, but there are many operators that are in the UAS community, in the farming community, in the survey community that also choose to operate stations for the economic benefit of earning tokens, as well as the utility benefit of having access to RTK data.
And it seems to me that it's not just this idea of let me offset my cost, but it seems as if it's almost mission guided. In other words, people, it feels like you're building a community.
Yeah, it really is a community. It's really building an ecosystem where you, in a sense, have a partial ownership or ability to control your contribution to the community. So if you need reference stations in a certain area and the provider that you have doesn't have quality coverage there, you can add that. So thereby you're helping your business. If you're a UAS operator in a certain area where the network coverage isn't great, you can solve that yourself, and at the same time earn from it, and at the same time realize you're helping your neighbors that maybe are using a RTK-based lawnmower, or maybe have some other needs for precision GPS data.
Or you're helping build out the kind of infrastructure backbone that is necessary to deliver these this solution to geographic areas that typically have been underserved, right? So
Absolutely.
nobody goes it alone fundamentally, but you guys have seemed to really extend that argument pretty aggressively.
Right.
Because when you called me 2 years ago and you can explain this to me, I thought, oh boy, blockchain for corrections, really? It's complicated, Mike, but guess what? Here it is. GEODNET has conveyed this pretty simple value proposition. So now that we understand the business model and the radical approach that disruptors and democratizers like Mike Horton have brought to bear here, let's talk. Let's get into the weeds on performance. Okay, let's talk about precision. Let's talk about accuracy and convergence time. How does it stand up to others?
So I think that the stations are really geodetic grade. We have a triple band, triple frequency, all constellation receiver in the stations. So Beto, Galileo, GLONASS, GPS, L1, L2, L5, all the signals fully modernized and very consistent. So one of the nice things about the GEODNET network is it's new. And everybody knows why a new house is like everything kind of works. That's kind of the same thing. Everything is new. So you don't have receivers of all different vintages and models and makes and firmwares across the network. You really have one consistent make of receiver and one consistent antenna. That antenna calibrated by the NGS and the database. All stations are monitored 24/7. They all have precise coordinates calculated through them we have a nice partnership with NRCan out of Canada, and use their PPP software to position all of the stations and get them into their various reference frames that are used around the world. So you can count on the data to be high quality when you log in and use the RTK service.
Got it. Okay. What about convergence time?
So convergence time is typically, it's going to depend a little bit on the quality of the rover. If you have a super high-end rover, it's going to be a little faster than a really low-end,
but the range can be from
anywhere from a few seconds to a couple of minutes, depending on the sky conditions and the quality of the receiver.
Sure. So we're here in San Diego in the midst of unmanned and uncrewed and remotely piloted in the UAS space, and we've been attending this conference for 15 years. There seems to be kind of a third wave of collaboration. Some people have fallen out of the market. There's new entrants. There's been some M&A activity, but there's this real kind of expectancy about this market. And I think you may well represent one of the types of firms that is kind of helping drive that. So, to the UAS integrators and the platform builders and the drone service providers, whether it's a small team working for an engineering company, land survey, or it's a larger team working for an enterprise like oil and gas or utilities, what's the fundamental value proposition for GEODNET corrections as compared to what they're likely using right now?
Yeah, so what we've seen a lot in the UAS space is still a lot of people taking base stations out in the field with a mobile base station and setting up a temporary mobile base station setup. And we think that is because the access and cost and availability of high quality RTK networks hasn't been that great. Because ultimately that's not convenient. You got to have that thing charged, you got to find a good location for it. If there are too many trees, it can be a real pain, it can get knocked over. A lot of things can go wrong. It's just an extra piece of equipment to take out. Using an RTK network, if you trust it, is super convenient. In the case of the GEODNET network, it's super affordable, so it's much less expensive than owning and maintaining your own separate base station, and it's more scalable. You can deploy multiple systems in parallel. It's just very convenient, and if you are doing work that you don't have cellular coverage at the time, you can do that post-processing process. So there's always, we have all the data from all of our stations stored for Renix files, and there's a post-processing workflow as well. So ultimately, we believe that the primary benefit is the convenience and cost savings of using a network versus owning, maintaining, managing your own base stations and taking those out to the field every time you want to do a drone job.
And the cost differential is pretty significant.
It's quite
Can
significant.
you characterize it for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're looking at a sort of 10-year type of savings. So if you invest, depending on which base station you invest in, you could have a subscription, global subscription to GEODNET network, use it anywhere on the planet, and have that capability for more than 10 years before you would pay back the cost of a base station. And in the case of some of the base stations that are out there, it'd be more like 30, 40 years. So you're gonna have you're going to have a lot of extra money in your pocket for a long time by using a network as opposed to acquiring a RTK base station.
Right. So can you talk a little about integration and interoperability with GNSS receiver manufacturers? And how important is that to be kind of multimodal, have the ability to integrate with lots of multi-constellation receivers depending on who they're using? What's been your strategy there, and how goes that strategy, and with whom do you currently have integration or collaboration agreements?
Yeah, so GEODNET is broadly compatible with all the receiver manufacturers out there, and part of why that happens is because the stations on the GEODNET network are fully modernized, support all the constellations and frequencies. That means that sort of no matter what receiver you have, as long as it has support for NTRIP, which is very standardized, and RTCM, which is very standardized at this point, you're going to be able to get consistent RTK fix with the GEODNET network. If you were to connect to some receivers to older networks, those older networks might not have all the constellations and all the frequencies, and you can create incompatibility. For example, I might have an L1, L5 only receiver, which is becoming very popular, especially in the low end of the market. And if my RTK network is only L1, L2, which is the case for a lot of the state networks in the United States, they're not going to mesh well together. You're not going to be able to get reliable RTK fix because the network is dual band, but L1, L2, the rover is dual band but L1, L5, so now you only have a one common signal, the L1 channel, and that just doesn't perform. Single band RTK just doesn't perform very well. So we're broadly compatible. The GEODNET network is broadly compatible with the receivers that are out there.
Okay. And that is good for builders, drone service providers, everybody to know, because it's easily integratable.
And it gives you choice. If you like Septentrio more than you like U-Box, or if you like Quectel, or you like whatever you like, Trimble, whatever your favorite flavor of receiver is, or you've had experience, or you're using other parts of their ecosystem, you can count on it working well with GEODNET.
So you're GNSS receiver agnostic. You want to collaborate and interoperate with all of them.
Absolutely.
Got it. So, well, thanks for that clarity. When you look at this market, what's your vision of how GEODNET can build out in the next year, 2 years? Let's say we're in Detroit in 2 years at this very conference.
Right.
And I'm going to tell you now, we're going to have this conversation in Detroit in 24 months.
Right.
How many, what's the network going to look like? What's the user community going to look like? And what are the kind of layers of benefit that those user communities are going to be enjoying with GEODNET? Thoughts?
Yeah, our thoughts on 2 years out, our goal is definitely to be at 20,000 stations globally, and to have really consistent coverage throughout all the populated areas of the Earth that it's legal to operate RTK networks in. Sure. And I think in terms of applications, drones and UAS systems is going to be a major part of it. You've got so many different great applications in the UAS community, from drone delivery to drone mapping to just professional photography and cinematography, wanting that precise control of the drone flight that RTK provides, drone in a box, all these different capabilities that precise locations just makes so easy to do and so easy to fly with the drone.
The backdrop of which is the frequency and the incidence and the severity of interference as well. How does GEODNET helps create a more kind of resilient robust solution.
Yeah, I think from a RTK network point of view, if you have a certain set of stations and a certain deployment grid, and if there is interference near one of the RTK reference stations, then that's going to render that station inoperable for the rover. So having a higher density of networks, because drone RTK or GNSS interference, I should say, is typically pretty localized.
Yep.
Having more stations and more redundancy means that if there is interference in one area, it is likely that there are other stations that are nearby that aren't receiving that interference, so the RTK network can still be up and running.
Yeah, and the reason I bring that up, it seems to be a hot button issue at this year's event, not surprisingly.
Absolutely, and one of the things we're looking into is how can we leverage this global network of stations to help monitor and understand where interference is occurring. Currently, most of that's done with ADS-B, which is a great way to look for interference and look for spoofing and jamming. But we think that terrestrial stations also have a role to play in that, and that's something that the GEODNET community is looking into.
Interesting. Might add another layer.
Another layer.
Toughen, protect, augment. That's
Absolutely.
what they say. Well, Mike, is there anything else that you'd like to convey to our audience out there today that we didn't touch on?
I think the last key point would be GEODNET is free to try. So we have an in-trip form sign up on our website. Yep,
okay.
You can get yourself an account. If you're concerned it won't work with your drone or your application, don't hesitate to log on to the geodnet.com website or request an in-trip account. You can test it and try it yourself. And it's super enterprise friendly. We have an enterprise portal so that if you want to manage accounts on behalf of your customers or your team, you can do that yourself. So you're not coming back to the GEODNET Foundation every time that you want to add or remove an account. We have a whole enterprise portal, an API. You can manage all that on your own. That's part of the beauty of a decentralized network. And so you can really run your business on top of it, and RTK can just integrate in to your set of tools and use it on your terms and your conditions.
Sounds pretty strong. Mike Horton, Chief Executive Officer of GEODNET, want to thank you today for joining us.
Thank you for having me,
Yeah,
Rick.
of
Great
course,
to see you again.
Of course, it's good to see you, and thanks for educating our market here. This is Richard Fisher at Inside Unmanned Systems. We'll see you on the next live stream. Thanks.